lecture, which, if you haven't done this one yet, it's the first life forms. Okay, so let us begin. The origin of heredity. So it's actually, through some research and whatnot, scientists have come to this conclusion that the first molecule that actually contained all of our genetic information might not have been DNA, and it might actually have been RNA. There's actually a lot of different pieces of evidence to support this theory, this hypothesis. Because in addition to serving as the template for proteins, which we know proteins relate to our traits, some RNA molecules can actually self-replicate. So they can copy themselves. We call these RNA molecules ribozymes. First cells that were formed thought to be heterotrophic prokaryotes. You remember prokaryotes, very simple, very primitive cells. Not a defined nucleus, no membrane-bound organelles. Not all prokaryotes necessarily have like flagella. Some people, I don't know why they come up with that idea, but chemosynthesis, where this comes into play. So we have prokaryotes, but when it comes to our autotrophic organisms, it's believed that the first autotrophic organisms were all chemosynthesizers. If we were able to break down that word chemo, typically you think of chemicals, and then synthesis, you're making something. So we're making energy, making food, making sugar using some sort of chemical. The first autotrophic cells, chemosynthesizers, and in this case, like in hydrothermal sea vents, we have hydrogen sulfide. Your bacteria, as you can see, it'll take in inorganic compounds, like in this case, hydrogen sulfide. And we break down that hydrogen sulfide so that we can create sugar for our molecule, for our cell, and then you have sulfur compounds coming off as a byproduct. Yeah, chemosynthesis, you're producing energy through the oxidation, the breaking down of inorganic substances. And then we have our photosynthesis and aerobic respiration. So most modern autotrophs, like when you think autotrophs, you think of organisms making energy, making food for themselves. We think of plants. So our first photosynthesizers, most likely cyanobacteria. They use photosynthesis to make food, using light energy to create that sugar that we need for energy, that we need for fuel. And as we know, one of the byproducts of photosynthesis, so yeah, plants making itself food, but animals are benefiting because we get that oxygen as a byproduct. Well, once you have all this oxygen accumulating in the atmosphere, remember early Earth did not have the same atmosphere that it does today. But we have this oxygen accumulating in the atmosphere, but it needs to go somewhere. It can't just like float around because it's messing up with all the other enzymes, all the chemical reactions that these organisms were carrying out. So they had to bind to other compounds. This is how it's believed that our first aerobic respirators were created. So that's us making ATP in the presence of oxygen, aerobic anaerobic respiration. But the first eukaryotes, and we actually kind of talked about this when we first learned about prokaryotes, eukaryotes, and also the cell structure. So it's believed that the eukaryotic cell, remember, more complex, has organelles, has a defined nucleus, a lot larger than your prokaryotes. It's believed that they first evolved from larger prokaryotes. So you have these like huge, simple, but very huge cells that were around, and they took in smaller prokaryotic cells. And because of this, now we have organelles. But this whole theory behind, okay, larger prokaryote kind of eating smaller prokaryotes, we call this the theory of endosymbiosis. So within living together, if you kind of break that down. But the engulfed prokaryotic cells are considered the ancestors of some modern organelles. Bonus points if you can think of what those organelles are, though. And if you didn't know, just in case. Mitochondria and chloroplasts, because think about it. Chloroplasts are able to photosynthesize. They're able to make this energy for the cell. Same thing with mitochondria. Mitochondria is able to make energy for your cells. But In the case of mitochondria, these are prokaryotes were most likely able to carry out aerobic respiration. Chloroplast, we had prokaryotic photosynthesizers. And this is actually endosymbiosis in a nutshell. Like if we look at our time scale, so we have the ancestral prokaryote. Remember, all cells, whether prokaryote, eukaryote, has plasma membrane, cytoplasm, DNA. DNA of the prokaryote not very organized like it is in the nucleus. But over time, your plasma membrane starts unfolding. We now have like endoplasmic reticulum. We have a nucleus. But then it's like, okay, I want to start engulfing other prokaryotes. Aerobic, we have mitochondria. Then we start engulfing photosynthetic prokaryotes. We get the chloroplast, and then eventually we get the ancestral photosynthetic eukaryote in that case. And that's it for the first life forms.